I'm Rick Murphy, CEO and founder of Cogent Growth Partners. If you're a technology services provider or an MSP thinking about growth, acquisitions, and how to achieve a realistic liquidity strategy or an eventual exit, this show's for you. This is Cogent Conversations.
Excellent, George. So going back to personal readiness, the why an MSP should sell. You know, the owner is going to be asking those, why should they do it? What does winning look like for the MSP, for the owner, not for the buyer, but for them, for the MSP?
Sure. Well, if they're reasonable to begin with on what they can get, for the company, the win is dollar figure that works for them, dollar figure that gets them where they want to go, but also gets the company in a great spot, right? So where the customers are in a good position, even if whether the seller is staying or not, customers in a good position, the employees are in a good position. That fit, right? That culture fit is really important. Is it perfect? Not usually, but can be pretty close. Sure. If that's all there, and then there's an opportunity for the buyer. I know you asked about the seller, but the opportunity and the fit have to be right for the buyer as well. Then that works out well for the seller and allows them to potentially do all the things that they're trying to get out of it personally and for the company. It's not all just about money. It's also about the deal structure. How am I getting the money? So something that can get you the top of the guy that you're trying to get, but also is fair enough to everybody that has the right deal structure involved and maybe has some upside to it. Those are all wins for a seller. Something that you can basically, full well that nothing's going to be dicey. That's a win. It's all your ducks are in a row. The buyer's going to do what they have to do to look at things. You're not going to be asking or answering weird questions that you don't want to be answering. So everything is set up. That makes your life easier. Things will be smooth. There's always going to be some bumps in the road, but relatively smooth. That is a win for the seller as well. So figuring out things while you're in due diligence that you didn't realize and you have to defend it, that is not good. That is not good for the seller in any stretch of the imagination. So understanding that there might be those things. We do this like in our EVs, or enterprise valuations, that we do for people that are just trying to see where they are right now. One of the biggest things that we put in there is, what are the warts that everybody's going to see? What can you fix? And what is avoiding the iceberg on the Titanic? It's like, it is what it is. I can't do anything about it. All I can do is get the best story that I can possibly do and be able to explain that to mitigate the risk that the seller is going to have going through their head, that it's not so much a problem when I'm here, but it's probably going to be a little bit of an issue for you, Mr. Buyer, because I'm not going to be here and it's not the same thing. And, as a seller, you can't fool yourself. Just because everything works great, even though it's a little cagey, but it works great while you're there, things are going to change. Even if you're still there, things are going to change. So those things might not be so smooth without you being the person running everything and front running everything. And that client, you're not the main contact person. It does change the dynamic. So understanding all of that stuff is going to help to get to that best case scenario at the end, which might mean just less pain than not knowing it was coming, but it's still going to be some kind of pain.
Is sometime ego check required?
Oh, ego check is always required. Yeah, absolutely. There's even with the buyer. So it's something I'm sure you've heard any person from Cogent saying this, transaction therapy, right? It's all inside of that stuff. It's all about a relationship. MSPs, just like most service companies, but especially in this space, everything's built on relationships, right? So you got your customers based on relationships, and everything you do is based on that. You will buy and sell companies also on relationships. So ego problems are not going to help. And so even if it's just say a more professional buyer, like a private equity or someone to that extent, family office, they also need to leave the egos at the door, because it doesn't work very well in this space for sure. But everybody you're dealing with is smart. Okay, it's trying to be the smartest person in the room is probably a bad idea. Not getting you know taken for granted is a whole different story. But you need to leave the ego at the door. There's going to be emotion, so that's another piece. Emotion, leave it at the door as well. It's going to happen. It happens with the buyers too, right? So they're getting ready to take on some debt or take money out of their pocket, or their fund, whatever the case may be. It doesn't matter. It's still a risk involved. And so sometimes emotion gets in the way of doing things. But if everybody is, honest with each other and open, typically that takes care of itself. But yeah, egos and emotions don't work very well, but they're going to rear their heads. But it's just a matter of how controllable that is on both sides.
How do you get over the whole issue of is the MSP, are they prepared to sell their baby?
Yeah. So that comes back to having everything planned already. So, what am I trying to get out of this? If you're not okay with that in your head, then you're not ready to sell. Whether that baby is a $2 million company or a $20 million company, it doesn't really matter. You're going to have a hard time letting go of certain things and have a hard time negotiating from a point of reality and business and not emotion. So that's the emotion part. But it actually, Joe, it starts earlier than that. It's when somebody's looking at the company, whether, again, we're doing a valuation just for the, because we're getting paid to do a valuation versus we're doing it for a buyer. It doesn't really matter. That's the point where you have to let go, catch the reality, and realize that your company might not be as good as you think it is. The whole little bit of a baby's ugly type of scenario. It is what it is. It's not as well put together as you probably think. So it's not an insult. This is the way it is. So we can probably get something done, but this is what's going on. So you need to understand that, yes, this is your baby and you got it to this point. And if you want to be able to take the money off the table, this is how it can be done. That is the hardest part, is people not realizing that it's as simple as, I make this, believe me that I make this, multiply it by this, give me a check, and I'll sign a quick piece of paper. There's a lot involved with it. And when people start asking you real questions from a diligence standpoint, people do start getting offended because they're asking about their baby. But it is a business related thing. Right. As much as it is a relationship related thing that got you there, at the same token, you have to be okay with the fact that the people are going to look at this company differently than you are. The plus side is that if you got to that point, you should be proud of the fact that somebody is looking into it enough to say, I think I want to buy this and bring this into my family of companies. Or if it's a platform, be the start of something big. But the scrutiny is going to come with it, and you're going to have some thick skin to deal with that, for sure.
Yeah, because, at some point, the MSP is going to realize it's going to be a different culture, right? There's going to be decisions you're not going to make anymore. There may even be layoffs, there are brand changes. All this is possible. And sometimes it's difficult for the MSP to wrap their hands around or their mind around.
Yep, absolutely. And that comes into play to what you're trying to do. So, if the company is big enough, there are some options out there now that didn't exist. So the cool part about this industry is things are certainly different than 20 years ago. Cogent's been around for 16 years. It's different from 16 years ago. Leading up to the COVID era, things changed around. Certainly after COVID, things changed a lot. There's a lot of different options out there. Not everybody is saleable. So that's the other thing. It's just, not every company is good enough to be bought. That You have to understand that. But there are more options now than there were before. So it's a plus to understand where you want to be, where you want to end up. You brought up the branding thing. That's where I got this from. Is more people used to, people said it to us all the time. We have this brand. Let's be honest. Nobody has a brand like it's on a commercial type of level, but they have the way they do things for their customers in that geo actually is important. And certain things can't change. And sometimes it is better if you don't change the name of the company. Pretty much not an option 7 years ago, not even 4 years ago, for the most part. It became a little more popular with the types of buyers that are in the space where they're able to kind of keep the branding, if you will, or at least to keep the facade, is what they say. So you walk in the door, you walk in 5 feet, it's not your company the way it was anymore, but the first 5 feet look exactly like it was before. That's an option. Does that happen with every buyer? Absolutely not. There's only a couple. So that's part of what you need to have in your head that would fit for you, because not every buyer is going to fit. And it could be somebody that's not even offering you as much money. It's close, but the rest of it makes more sense. Everybody's going to be happier. You're going to feel better about it. You think it's going to work out better. Those things, the options are different now than they were before. But that goes into the what will work for me type of setup. We have plenty of people that, they want to be a platform and they're just not big enough to be a platform. They probably could run a platform and they're at 2 million to the bottom, which is awesome, but it's not big enough for a true PE type platform. Last 2 or 3 years kind of changed. There's options to have a sort of a platform kind of scenario or a smaller platform scenario, but that wasn't there before. So thinking these things through, we talk to people every day about this stuff. Always happy to tell them all the different options that are out there they're different. You built a really good company. You have 3 or 4 things you can do. You asked me 10 years ago, it was one thing. Now it's 3 or 4 things you could possibly do. It's an awesome setup right now in the space, but that also, with that comes different decisions and things that you have to think about beforehand that will work for you. Sometimes you just don't know anybody until you hear it. That's why we like to throw it out there. It's like, look, this is viable for what you're thinking about and what your company looks like. What do you think fits best for you? And that's where we go to our clients that, that actually makes more sense. Like, don't waste time looking at these 2 guys over here. They're not going to set you up the way you're looking for. It's not going to be the right deal structure. It's not going to be the whole branding thing or whatever it happens to be that you're looking for. But these buyers, they do that. But back to, if you don't know that, you can't make that decision. But you do need to be thinking about what's going to be best for you in your company at the end.
This is Cogent Conversations.